Felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders.
The girlfriend just going to make you aware this week.
Self-werewolf.
Don't touch the fucking microphone, right?
Sorry, you did it first.
Yeah, when we didn't know it was an issue.
Yeah, you made it an issue, like you make everything else an issue. You fucked it up, like. Oh, no. No telling how all this awakened.
What does wagwan mean, girl?
Wagwan.
Yeah.
Wagwan. I think that's like an English slang thing. Did someone say wagwan?
Yeah.
Wagwan. Oh, wagwan, is it? Is that what the kids say now, is it? Wagwan. I actually don't know what it means, but I know it means something slaggy, you know?
Slag night.
Are we live? Oh my God.
We are.
Take that music out.
Oh, wagwan is a Nigerian slang term that's popular in the UK. IIRC. What's IIRC mean?
IIRC. If I recall correctly.
If I recollect.
If I recollect it.
Hope everyone's having a great day. If you could like the stream, as always, to give you the usual spiel, if you could like the stream, that would be great. It's been a busy few days in Sikistan. We're fulfilling orders from the merch order, which is now over. I hope everyone got what they needed.
Sincerely, like.
Sincerely.
You sincerely hope everyone got what they needed.
If ye could like the stream, we'll give it a minute to get your questions in early because, as you well know, usually we get to like halfway down the stream before we have to cut it, or halfway through the questions before we have to cut it off.
Yeah, generally like 55 minutes. It's been connecting into like an hour, you know? You can't be going all day. Can't be at it all day, like.
No.
You can't be at that all day.
Okay, let's give it another 32 seconds. And if you keep liking the video, we'll give it what is now going to be 24 seconds. We'll start answering questions. If you have questions, get them in early. This sun is very warm.
Yeah, it's in your face, look.
It's like right there. It's reflecting off your phone screen. Could you move your phone screen?
Does anyone know anything about phones, actually? So if I'm due a new phone, and obviously I'm not going to get an iPhone, but I think the Samsung, I have a Samsung S21. I'm going to go, I might get the S22 if I can get it.
S22?
Yeah. Ever since Huawei lost the Play Store.
Huawei?
It's a disaster.
Wait, do they not have a Play Store?
Yeah, I remember you got one last year, and you couldn't use to return it. That's why you have a Google phone.
Did I return that?
You did, yeah.
I cannot remember that.
That was a year ago. That wasn't not even a year ago. It's not that long ago there.
No, it's not. I've had the Google phone longer than a year.
The Google phone? What's that look? I feel like there's some...
Can you put it behind slightly?
I was trying to do that, but
yeah,
the image quality is not as good, so it's like...
Yeah.
It's making it not perfect. The chains of the world, they see the moving time. I try to walk around, but I stumble in so familiar.
Okay, we better start answering questions. So, everyone's checking in. Not That Strong Guy, Heavy, Nicholas Carras, Zachariah, Erico, Dr. Demographics, Colts, Eric, So Simple, Nicholas, Evan Lee, as always, Evan Lee is there, Jonah, Eric, all checking and saying hello, and hello to you guys. Okay, first with a question, Chris J says, hey lads, if I'm still very sore from my last session, should I postpone the session another day or push through? It depends. Generally, you should just postpone it if you're very, very sore. You're not going to get that much benefit from it. But it really does depend what stage of training you're in. If you are a player during a prep phase or pre-season, you're probably going to be very sore all the time, because you're really pushing the high capacity work rate stuff. So if you're like a rugby player in an off season or in a pre-season piece, you should probably do the next session. Or if you're a bodybuilder doing the start of your prep, you should probably do the next session. But if you're an athlete in season, or you're doing a off season piece where you're trying to gain muscle or gain strength, then you should probably take a rest day. Colts 89 says, what is your core stability baselines for powerlifting? So what I really like is someone to have body weight, so add their body weight onto their hips and be able to do a plank for 1 minute. So 100 kilos, 425 kilo plates on your hips, plank for 1 minute. I think that's very good for anterior core work. I like to do around 50% of body weight for a back extension hold. So holding 225 kilo plates on a 45-degree back extension, being able to hold that for a minute. There are two kind of general outlines I like to have. I genuinely think people should be able to do around 5 sets of side plank for a minute each side. They're the rough kind of things we're all moving towards with the powerlifters anyway. Callum Bud Brophy said, decided on your next challenge, Fitz. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the bodybuilding block and then it's some jiu-jitsu specific stuff, and start that next week. But when I go into the specific kind of judo style training, I'm going to just do heavy cleans. Yeah.
Judo.
I was talking about Ono Shoshe. You obviously didn't watch the video, Gareth.
I actually didn't.
My God, you're just so unsupportive.
I was traveling.
It's just Team Gareth over there in his own life.
I was solo traveling. I had stuff to do, my business.
So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. But I'm gonna push some heavy cleans then, like the end of December, start of January time, and see where I can get my clean up to. But I probably won't go for the 180 clean this time around.
Wagwan. Decided next challenge. If Lash had trained for a maximum clean for 2 years, what do you think he could clean? Probably like 280, I would imagine, if he just did cleans. Probably not a whole lot more, but I certainly think 280 would probably happen if he's doing 217, if he just gave everything and took a lot of steroids. I think he'd probably do like 280.
Yeah, it wouldn't be massively more than what he's doing already.
Which would still be very impressive, of course.
Yeah. Halam4 says, do you have a video or podcast on strength baselines or general thoughts on if they're of any use? Do we have videos on them? We talk about them a lot. I'm sure if you went through the channel, there's so many videos now.
I think we need to. We haven't done those yet. We thought those for a long time. I think we thought those since last year, but we haven't done one.
Yeah.
On baselines for specific sports. No, we don't have videos on those.
We've done so many videos now where I'll have a genuine thought and I'll be like, oh, we should do a video on this. And then we'll have already done a video on it like 2 years ago.
You can't remember all our videos?
About. No.
Strange.
You don't even watch all our videos.
I do. Just don't watch your videos though.
Hey. In terms of like general thoughts and if they're of any use, I think they're definitely of use if you're coaching like big groups of people or if you're coaching multiple athletes within the same sport. Baselines and benchmarking is very, very important, in my opinion, because that's what all of us are here to do, is get better. And nobody's a snowflake when it comes to training, you know, like nobody's in a unique position where, oh, I don't have this prerequisite strength in my pressing or in my squatting or in my pulling, but my particular technique makes up for it. I don't think anyone should be thinking along those lines. I think it's quite maladaptive to think like that. You should always compare yourself to norms for strength training. I think that just makes more difference.
What do you mean about technique? What you say?
Just some people are like, oh, I'm just really technique focused, so I won't focus on strength that much.
People say that.
We know some gyms that say that. You know it.
What gyms?
Wouldn't really have any emphasis on squatting or pressing. I'll tell you after.
Oh, yes, I do know.
You know.
Callum is saying, how's Anton coaching? Very good. Yeah, so literally just doing 2 sessions a week. Well, I'll be doing 3 this week, but just pretty... The sessions are very intense. get a lot done in the session. So a lot of volume, pushing the weights. So like interesting stuff is like volume. Say if you're doing like snatch triples, it'll be triples all the way up. So if you were snatch triples at 120 kilos, it'll be like 50 at 3, 70 for 3, 90 for 3, maybe 90 for another 3, 100 for 3, 110 for 3, 115 for 3, 120 for 3. Like it's threes all the way up and down, you know. So it's interesting things like that. Or say for me, it's like pulls. Need to do a lot of pulling, so he puts pulls before squats, which after a lot of volume in the lifts, and then a lot of volume, and there's a lot of volume on the pulls. Like so, it might be 7 or 8 sets of heavier pulls, then to go do like more volume on squats, you know. So it's interesting. But he thinks my back is weak, so that is his prerogative there, and that's why he's doing that. So you'll interesting to see what the program looks like when there's more weightlifting focus, you know, whenever that is. Yeah, that's good though. I like it. If you have a lot of muscle mass in one part of your body, would it make it easier to put muscle mass in another part of your body? No, that doesn't really. The question is an unusual question. It might indicate that if you have ability to put a lot of muscle mass on somewhere, then you might have a chance to put muscle mass on somewhere else. But having muscle mass somewhere else doesn't really facilitate you being able to put muscle mass on anywhere else in your body, realistically. Just maybe a general indicator of your ability to put on muscle mass.
I think for most people, we really underplay the role of genetics and how genetics influences where we're going to hold more muscle tissue. Like, I really think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to be really upper body focused now, and I'll be in a calorie surplus, and I'm going to gain weight in my upper body. For a lot of people, you still won't get like the kind of capped off delts or the massive big traps that you'd see other people getting. Or vice versa, you would see some people putting a lot of work into their legs, particularly like their lower legs and calves, trying to put on muscle mass there. In the vast majority of cases, people who have freakishly large proportions in terms of like they have massive traps or they have massive calves or in those specific areas, it's kind of genetic predisposition has allowed them to put on that muscle mass there. And it's not necessarily that the way they train is allowing them to put that muscle mass on. It's more likely that they've genetic predisposition to holding more muscle in that certain area. And then because they're already biased in that direction, they'll train that area a lot because like they might have great arms or great legs or whatever. And then it kind of forces more and more adaptation in that area because you're always going to do more of what you're good at. So I will say that like people being very site specific with where they're gaining muscle tends to be non-ideal because you'll just get kind of worn down over it. Whereas if you're thinking about, oh, I want to gain 5 kilos in the next year and try and make that as lean as possible, I think that's much better rather than just saying I want to get bigger arms or bigger legs or bigger ass or whatever.
Big ass.
Big ass. Good high ass.
Robert McNeely saying, hey guys, do you have staples to include a 3-day off season for field-based athletes? Also, any recommendation in line with this program or with this for your programs on the website? So in general, like you don't need to have any staples like or stapling guns when you're an athlete in the off season. Like I've never seen it being useful.
There he is.
Go on.
So in terms of like staples to include a 3-day week, so for field-based athletes, just do the off-season athlete program. Instead of running it 4 days a week, you run it 3 days a week. Instead of it lasting 4 weeks, it'll last for 5 weeks. That works perfectly for almost everyone. A lot of people do that as a 2-day week program or a 3-day week program in their off-season, and they just stretch out the length of the program. Overall, that works really, really well. In terms of like staples to include, I'm wondering, are you asking like staples in terms of like aerobic training to include in your off-season or things along those lines? Off seasons are actually very, very, there's a massive amount of inter-individual difference with an off season. So I could take 5 rugby players who are all playing in the front row who are pretty similar and they'll all need different amounts of aerobic work in their off season because so there's a load of very specific cases for this, right? But take the example of somebody who needs to gain 5 kilos of mass in an off season. Initially, when you're thinking about that, you'll think, I need to gain 5 kilos of mass, so I do the least amount of physical activity possible. My aerobic values are going to plummet, then I'll gain all that mass a lot easier. Then I'll go back to preseason at my desired weight, right? What happens for those people is they go back into preseason at a desired weight. They've now gotten into such a trough with their aerobic work, the preseason becomes a massive ordeal, and then all of those weight values go down immediately. So although they've gone back as 120 kilos, they're now going to be starting their first league games of the year as 112 or 113 kilos, and they're in a massive deficit now, and the off season has done almost nothing, right? So in those cases, it's better for someone to maintain a certain level of aerobic output during the summer, to have a certain baseline of aerobic strength during the summer. And then when they go back to preseason, although they might have only gained 4 kilos instead of gaining 5 kilos, they'll hold on to a much larger proportion of that weight gain. They'll be in a much better shape when they get to their first league game, and they might be 115 kilos instead of 112 kilos, if that's what you're asking.
Preferred exercises for core strength and stability that will transfer over to Olympic lifts, not that strong. So I think probably the biggest thing you'll see most weightlifters needing to do, and then you'll see a lot of good weightlifters doing it, is just is lower back work. So a lot of times people kind of forget that when we're looking at core stuff, generally you should be including lower back and lower back stability, hip stability, so anything that controls your pelvis and the stability of that, and your lower back and your spinal integrity all plays a part in that kind of core work. So in general, you don't need to do a lot of kind of anti-rotational work, or it's not massively needed for weightlifters. In general, what you will see is that the lower back and mid back and upper back kind of stuff are things you need to play a lot of part in. Hip abduction, adduction, like keeping the control of those hips and lower back, and ability to maintain a slight degree of extension in your back throughout the pull in the bottom position, are probably the most important ones for weightlifting, are the ones you see needed the most from people. So things like 45-degree back raises, reverse hypers if you have access and if you like them, Copenhagen planks are great, prone back extensions, IYTWs, and then you can do some generic core work, so like normal side planks instead of the Copenhagen planks. Sit-ups are not that bad. I think some people aren't a huge fan of sit-ups. We don't have a problem with them. We like them quite a bit. You'll see a lot of weightlifting teams will use them. They're pretty low tech needed, or there's very little you need for them. GHD sit-ups are quite useful, but obviously GHD sit-ups are just above or at parallel, not going all the way down. So general core work like that then is obviously useful on top of that, but not exactly necessary. Where most weightlifters could definitely benefit from is more of the lower back and the kind of hip stability stuff in terms of the core. It'll probably pay more dividends to actual technique transfer.
Smith Jitsu says, "Hey boys, run and clean up your clean for jits. What is the Sika approved wrist/front rack mobility routine prior to lifting? Also, I'm throwing in my vote for Fitz to go full jits Ono training." So I have like a general protocol that I'll give almost everyone, and they start off with, so it's just like a circuit. You do 3 exercises in the circuit. First thing, the exercise in the circuit is foam rolling the lats with a foam roller or a hockey ball or a barbell. You do 60 seconds on each side for that. Then the next thing they're going to do is just holding onto a chin-up bar with a supinated grip, ideally getting that head all the way through and hanging. Once you get more proficient at that, if you can tuck your hips up underneath by pulling your knees into your chest and just having your feet on a box, it's even better. And you just do 60 seconds of deep breaths when you're doing that. And then the last thing in the circuit is just a front rack, like a normal strict press on the front rack, where as you pull the barbell down, you drive your elbows out in front, and you're kind of like elongating those muscle fibers as you go through. So you go minute on each side, foam rolling, minute of active hanging on the chin-up bar, and then you do around 10 or 15 reps with an empty bar of strict pressing. I get people to do 3 or 4 rounds of that, and most of the time they are good to go.
I like the straight arm, internally rotated shoulder, holding onto a pillar, a squat rack, a drain pipe running down the middle.
That's a lovely one.
That's a great one. For somewhere in the region of like 60 seconds is generally the best. Then there's a great one you can do. So, and you'll actually see a lot of this in Sika Strength Guide to the Backsquat book when it is released. But go to a windowsill or a box. So we're sitting kind of, we're getting this parallel to the floor. We're here. Start off with unweighted exercise, and then we're just moving. Thumb facing you, hand open or closed, doesn't matter. Keep your wrist straight, and then just moving as far back as you can while actively doing it. We don't want to oversplay our ribs or open them up too much, so just keep the ribs fairly neutral. We don't need to lock them down or anything like that. There's no need to go full CrossFit level 1 on this. Just normal.
Lock it down, like.
Just keep it rigid. Same. Don't push your ribs down. Don't overarch. Just keep it normal. And then force it back as much as you can without compensating with your wrist. And then go back as far as you can, keeping this supported on the box, on the windowsill. Then eventually you can add weights. It's a little bit difficult to weight this one because you want the weight moving behind the kind of the joint here. So ironically enough, this is probably the only use for club belts. But if you had a weight on the end of a string or like a 2 kilo plate or a very long dumbbell for some reason, so something that's actively pulling you back this way. The reason we don't want like a dumbbell in our hand like this is we'll have to overcompensate a little bit and it won't drag you back as much or as useful. You could have someone pull it back for you, or you could, a little bit more awkward, is get a band and attached to a squat rack, set the box up in front of that and have it pull you there. But they're my 2 favorite ones in terms of front rack every day.
The last one we haven't mentioned is a preacher stretch. So like bar in your, or a stick in your hand, elbows on a box, and going back behind. Preacher stretch is great, particularly with the supinated grip. Okay. Aziz Norbakov says, I cannot wait to see Akbar all juiced up at Worlds. Me and you both, Aziz.
It's not that long now. It's only next month.
Yeah.
I assume it. I wonder, will we see all the big lifts now from everyone, or will we see them after? Or, we see the thing where someone comes like 5th and they're trying to prove a point and they could have come
2 weeks later then, yeah.
It's like a 20 kilo above the world record clean and jerk.
Yeah. Or like 15 kilos above the clean and jerk record just for the clean.
Yeah.
And they don't jerk it.
Or it cuts off before the jerk.
Yeah. Or else a massive rack jerk.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows if it goes. If it cuts off. You missed the jerk. Like, yeah. It wasn't like big clean PB. It's like you just didn't jerk.
No.
This. Like, yeah.
There's some people are murder for that. They'll just be like bouncing the bar here and the video will stop.
Mm-hmm.
Like massive clean PB.
Yeah.
I know exactly what I'm thinking about in my head.
Who are you talking about?
I can't tell you now.
All right.
Okay. So very clenny. Just so you. So Simple says, Fitz, how about a 500-pound squat and rowing a 7-minute 2K for the next challenge, easier on the feet? So one of my athletes, oh, my phone is dead. There's basically a concept erg. They call it the triple crown. So I think it's a 2K on the rower, a 2K on a ski erg, and 4K on the concept bike. And he sent me over the top 10 people in the world last year and what they hit. That kind of does appeal to me, I'm not going to lie. But I don't think I'm going to do it right now. But that would be phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Going sub 7 minutes for a 2K on the rower, I think I'm not too far away. Yeah, I'm not too far away from that. I think it felt pretty similar to that.
Mm-hmm. Where we gone? Dr. Demographics. If I'm focusing on hypertrophy for rugby 2 sessions a week, can I still keep my squat and bench in a low rep range to keep my strength up, or should I go all in on the volume? So if you're doing gym training at the moment for rugby, it means you're probably back in season, unless you've got knocked out already, which would be very unfortunate, but I hope not.
No, you're surely still in season.
So I wouldn't really be pushing the very high repetition stuff on the squat and the bench. You'd be looking more on maybe high rep stuff on dumbbell rows, maybe dumbbell pressing, the assistance work, whatever on that. Keep the volume higher on that, kind of lower systemic fatigue on those, a little bit more local fatigue, not as just draining for your in-season rugby playing, and not as fatiguing on your legs as much as possible. So I'd probably keep it lower. I wouldn't go all in on the volume for in-season stuff, unfortunately, because you will, unless you're on,
just about to say,
heap of steroids.
Yeah. Which is possible,
but probably not. If you're not, you're just going to be looking at like too much overall fatigue. You run a lot of kilometers in your training and you run a lot of kilometers on the pitch. And so all that adds up. It's also very psychologically stressful, which adds to the stress you feel from training. So doing a lot of high volume wouldn't be a great thing to do at the moment.
The other thing I would say is like there's massive amounts of empirical data out there on your level of fatigue and your likelihood of injury on the pitch, If to be perfectly honest, if a rugby player's in season, you're holding on to whatever you have and you're not really going to make massive strides in terms of hypertrophy or strength or power. Even though power might, if you've done a lot of strength training in your off season, power might improve. But most of the time when you're in season for rugby, you're just like holding on. It's like just those claws digging into the side of the ledge, you know.
But you're going to fall off eventually.
You're going to fall off and get injured eventually. But you want to be careful. You don't ever want to be going out onto the pitch. Like if you're wearing rugby boots, you never ever want to be fatigued. It's like a good rule of thumb. If you're going for a sprinting session, a rugby session, a match, or a captain's run, any of those, if you're doing something with rugby boots on, you never want to be fatigued. You can do gym sessions and stuff while fatigued, although their efficacy might be cut out, but your risk of injury is just viciously raised. A wild strongman appears and says, keto while strength training, but carbs for performance right around workouts. Thoughts?
So I am going to be honest, I'm not super up to date on any of the keto research or science. I followed it not closely for a while, but paid attention to it for a little bit, but not in the last few years. So the consensus used to be, and as far as I know it still is that you can't just drop in and out of ketogenesis while you are eating carbohydrates. So generally it seems to take a couple of days. So while what you're saying would certainly work for strength training, so you're having your carbohydrates before and after your training would be okay, specifically after as well, then you would replenish. So if you had enough carbohydrates, so if you had something, north of 100 grams, 200 or 300 grams maybe in that meal after, so you kept your carbohydrates the same, you would not very likely be able to be actually ketogenic. Now, you could certainly eat ketogenic style workout while you're not training or so further away from it. So let's say you've 4 meals a day, you've one small one before training and you've one larger one after training. And then for the other 2 meals, you'd eat ketogenic style, then you could certainly eat that way. And you might see some benefits. Some people prefer to eat no carbohydrates. In the morning, for example, they feel a little bit clearer throughout the day. They have less brain fog. You could see some benefits in that regard. There'd be nothing really wrong with that. But I don't think you'd be you'd be in ketogenesis if you're eating carbohydrates around training. It just wouldn't put you in that state. So if you really want ketogenesis, then I would be not using the carbohydrates, but that would definitely be detrimental for your strength training for sure.
One thing I will say is in the last year and a bit, I've had 3 different athletes doing lower carb pieces while they were going down in weight. And they did that stacking of carbs just around training, but it wasn't, in no way was that kind of like seeking any of the beneficial sides of being ketogenic. They were literally just trying to reduce overall calories, trying to reduce overall carbs, and then they'd stack carbs around training. That seemed to work well for everybody I've seen do it so far, but it's not, they're not trying to get that kind of leveling out of energy that you'd see with people talking about with keto. They're not trying to get those favorable brain values people talk about with keto. So it all kind of comes down to what you want to get out of it. Certainly doing your training, as Garth said, without carbs is not, it doesn't seem to be the way if performance is what you want. If you're not too bothered about performance and you just want to live your life and you're doing all those other things that we're not really interested in, then definitely you could do keto with your training sessions. Like if you're just lifting some weights, you enjoy doing the strongman thing or whatever, and you're not viciously competitive and maladaptive in other areas of your life because of it, then maybe keto all the time might be good. But if performance is the thing you want, carbs are great.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Grey Ford says, hello, Grey Ford. Okay, Unmec says, and I think we know what's going on here, Unmec. Missing in front because I rely too much on dorsiflexion to get low. Is it a real issue? Do I jump back a small amount? But I do jump back a small amount, but my extension is so vertical. So it's very, very... So firstly, what Unmec is talking about is he gets a lot of knee travel forward. He gets to sit into a really deep squat. And someone is telling him he's missing out in front because he's getting his squat too deep or because he's using dorsiflexion too much. That's probably not what's actually happening, although it will appear to be happening. So very likely what's happening here on Mech is you're pushing the barbell too far out with your hips. So you might have too much of that front to back display or back to front displacement when the barbell comes in and hits your hips. And then it's very, very likely you're not pulling the barbell close with your upper body. So that kind of position of pulling the elbows high, shrugging up with your traps, and guiding that barbell upwards. That's very likely what's happening here. The fact that you're jumping back a small amount means you probably have straight arms after the extension, and it probably means you're hitting the bar with your hips too much. So without seeing a video, it's very likely that's what's happening. Is it a real issue? It could be a real issue, but it's very likely that that's what's happening. The issue could be at your point of extension and that pull under rather than your squat depth. Rob Hallett says, recently separated my shoulder and I'm looking for hope that it'll come back. Any experience of shoulder injuries yourselves? I've done my AC joints on both sides.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. I walked in, a physio walked in one day and I was like there like this waiting to see him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he was literally like, your AC joint's gone. And he just went like this and his finger went in to my AC joint. He's like, come back in 2 weeks.
Did it hurt?
Fuck yeah, it hurt.
What did you have to do for 2 weeks?
I just iced it. It was hanging out like
Jesus.
I've only dislocated my right shoulder once ever.
You've no nasty issue with your shoulders?
No.
Mad. Did you do a rehab work though?
I did. For the first 2 years after I stopped playing rugby, I did rehab every single day. And I got physio every week.
Physio doesn't work. The rehab doesn't work. You know that stretching doesn't do anything.
It works so well.
No.
You see pictures of me when I started lifting, I was like, could not do this. Like, no way.
What were you doing? What rehab work were you doing?
Loads of work on my lats. Loads of work on my pecs. So I was like this. I was like a gorilla, like this.
Yeah.
Terrible posture.
Mm-hmm.
And then just a lot of external rotation work, a lot of internal rotation work. And now it looks like I never played rugby.
It genuinely does look like you never played rugby. It looks like you didn't even try when you played rugby. It looks like you didn't try hard enough at all.
Oh, I tried.
If I saw you, I'd be like, there's no way you didn't play that much rugby. Like,
jeez, so your supraspinatus comes out underneath your collarbone and attaches onto your shoulder. And I tore that. And that was the worst, in terms of pain, the worst injury ever.
Interesting.
It was like over the top of a ruck like this.
Right.
A guy hit me from behind and dislocated my shoulder forward and tore that. And that was insane.
Remember you tore your pec back squatting as well?
Yeah.
That's gas.
Yeah.
No advice for you, Rob, unfortunately.
It can definitely come back, but you have to work hard at it. The problem as well is like everything you do every day is like making your shoulders worse.
Geez, jiu-jitsu really makes your shoulders worse.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm like, Anton like very tight elbows. And it was really good. Like it was really good there just before I've kind of moved through the kind of this phase of weightlifting and whatever, you know. But so funny. So he's like front squats with straps. Nicholas Carras said, cutting caffeine gives, caffeine headaches. Is the performance benefits of taking caffeine pre-major event as a stimulant worth the lower quality of training in the short term from headaches during training? Yes, because your taper training shouldn't be that hard. And just I'm not signaling out.
I can feel your chair rising up and you're taking
No.
2 seconds.
No. I'm not signaling out Nicholas here, right?
What's it like up there?
But if you can't do a few sessions of caffeine, then you need to have a good look at yourself. And then you need to take a measure of how much of a bitch you are and just kind of shovel that out the door, you know?
Yeah.
No, if a few days, if you can't train for a few days without your caffeine, I have no respect for you as an athlete. If a few days, for a major benefit for the event. Now, Nicholas, I just want to reiterate.
It's nothing to do with you.
Nicholas, I don't know you from Adam, so I'm not calling Nicholas out, right?
It's not that he doesn't respect you. He doesn't respect anyone.
But if you can't do a few days of a taper for whatever sport that is, without a little caffeine, you little baby, don't talk to me when I have a coffee. No, I've actually no respect for you. No respect.
So in the literature, washout periods for caffeine, or like anything after 10 days is pretty much like you're done, you know.
Nicholas actually confirmed he said he's a massive bitch.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, it's his
fault. Oh, sorry, Nicholas.
But I just want to reiterate, I'm not I hope
the people around you are still dealing with that.
I just mean anyone.
But so washout periods for caffeine, in most of the literature you look at, everything after 10 days is pretty much bunk, you know. For most people, a week is loads. For all my athletes when they're doing weightlifting camp, a week is loads. They'll literally be shaking and jittery when they have their first like monster coffee after it, you know.
Yeah, like 5 or 6 days is like.
Yeah, so if you have competition on a Saturday, stop drinking it on the Sunday and you're good. Usually, if you stop drinking it on the Sunday, on Tuesday evening, usually you'll get a splitting headache. And in the case where that splitting headache is so bad where it's like influencing other things, half a can of Coke Zero. So most of the time with Coke Zero, you've around 25 milligrams of caffeine. Half of that can or 3/4 of that can is usually enough to stave off that kind of aggressive throbbing your nicotinic receptors in your brain are giving you. So that should be enough to just stave it off. And it's not like it's going to kill the washout of caffeine from your system, although it will affect it slightly. But most of the time, 7 days is loads. 10 or 15 milligrams on the third day or second day of washout should usually stave off the headaches. The only time when I'll get someone to stop doing it, or like the main time when I get someone to stop doing it, is if the headaches are so bad they're affecting their sleep, which can actually happen. People get very stressed over it. But you should be able to just stop caffeine.
Also, that kind of thing where you'll be allowed to have caffeine again in a few days, so there's not a problem. Like
no,
it's not like it's not like someone's like, you can never have food again. You know that. You can have food again. Like you can
do it again. You just can't have it right now.
It's what a lot of the it's what I think it was like. Remember when a certain D Goggins was getting very large, right? And talking about Hell Week and buds and stuff, and I think it was Jocko and Echo Charles were talking about this, and they were like,
people who had actually been to war.
No, they were like, look, it's going to end. It's not a big deal. Like you just keep doing it until it's finished. Yeah.
I just don't like Goggins.
Not quite similar, but that's what they were saying. They were like, look, buds isn't that big a deal, like compared to actually fighting, and also buds is going to end. So you just have to keep doing it.
Banana Bread has a question regarding speed of movement dictating muscle fibers. So, for example, a boxer wants to focus on mental stroke strategy training. If shadow boxing after pad work, sparring, etc., does this mean physiological make himself slower? So there's a couple of things here. The first thing is, if you're looking to do mental or strategic training, shadow boxing probably isn't where you need to go, where you're kind of physically moving through it, because that speed of movement and the tempo of movement and the reaction to other things happening isn't reflective of what happens in real life. Like most of the time you're reacting to something, or if you're setting something up, you're waiting for something to happen and then you'll go on that reaction point. When you're shadow boxing, you're essentially kind of like just moving through a sequence that you're probably not going to use too often. In cases for boxing or any striking sport, the use of visualization training or the use of mental training in general is underwhelming, I'd say, to give you the honest answer. Most people should be doing mental imagery training and visualization training in the striking sports, and it will make a massive difference, because you can have that thing where you're sitting in your chair. You might even be sitting in your chair wearing boxing gloves, which actually makes a difference in the studies. Wearing a boxing glove, sitting in a chair, and you're thinking about patterns. You're thinking about how you react when you get a right hook thrown at you. You think about how you react when you get a right hook thrown at you, and everything like that. What's happening in your brain is those motor neurons and the mirror neurons attached to those are actually firing. They're firing at the same rate and at the same tempo as they would in real life. And they're firing in reaction to movements that you're perceiving. So although if Garth throws a punch at me now, I'll perceive Garth throwing a punch at me through my visual inputs. When I'm sitting here doing my standard visualization training, I'm still perceiving that through something similar to a visual input, but it's just my brain interacting with my optic nerve. All of that is still happening the whole time. So I think rather than thinking you need to be actually shadow boxing and moving through, I think you should be getting some proper mental imagery training, getting strong at that, and then using that for your technique work.
Orlando is asking, hi lads, is there an amount of sport-specific work in a power sport that can bridge the gap between strength and plyo work without doing actual plyo work or speed strength work, with or without PEDs? So theoretically, some people might say yes. In reality, they're wrong though. So this just isn't something you see. So if you took like Daniel Stahl, which is German for steel.
I saw that.
German for
That's
steel.
legit.
So if you take someone like Daniel, right, he's a phenomenal thrower by all accounts. And the training he does is incredible, as you would have seen from the video. So he's doing huge amounts of speed strength work with massive weights, with weights that are well beyond 1RM for most of the people who ever lifted a weight. And if we just see, in reality, we just don't see people across any power sports who are truly the best of the best doing it with just sport specific work. So we don't see people doing discus or any of the throwing events, doing that without any kind of sport specific or without any kind of strength training work. We don't see wrestlers, which I'd consider certainly a power sport, considering how intense they move. They're notorious for doing some ridiculous training. If we look at Ono Shoshi Judo, so if we look at the best people, so if we don't look at people who just do the sport, but if you look at like some of the best people across the sports, especially as the years go on, you don't see anybody not doing S&C. Now, an S&C isn't making them the best. It's just helping them realize the potential they have, facilitates their sport-specific work, of course, but you just don't see people have that ability to do that without overloading the weights in the training room. When they add more force, the discus is only so heavy, the javelin is only so heavy. You can use different implements, but no amount of extra weight in your discus is going to make up for being able to do 270 kilo squats for a triple over the course of 4 seconds. There's just no amount of overload you can get from your sport specific work that will match the overload you can get from the really controlled, really easily progressive environment that the gym will allow you to do. So there's nothing Daniel could do in the pitch or on the throwing circle or whatever it is, the throwing dungeon, where he could overload that stuff so much that could match his ability to deadlift 350 for 5 touch and go in the space of like 5 or 6 seconds. There's just nothing you can do in any sport that will give you those gains in force production over a very short period of time. The sports themselves are, very useful. Like judo, for example, is a very explosive sport and you're quite heavy. But again, there's only so many repetitions you can do of that. There's only so much specificity you can get to certain areas when you're doing those judo throws. For example, whereas you see Ono Shosho training, it's really heavy dumbbell rows. It's the snatches, the power cleans. It's just stuff that is not really replicable or ability to get as many quality repetitions in your sport-specific activities. Even with PEDs, even in those scenarios, you'd certainly go from here to here if you started taking PEDs in a power sport. And if you were doing no S&C, if you never did S&C and you were doing your sport-specific work, your performance would certainly increase if you took performance-enhancing drugs, without a doubt. But you'd still see more again if you were doing S&C, essentially, or strength training or power training. There is a reason. What I loved about that Daniel Sell video was that it was just
all heavy stuff.
It's just all heavy stuff as fast as possible. It's the stuff we've been talking about for years at this stage, and I know a lot of you guys watching obviously buy into what we're saying, and I make buy-in sound like it's not the way, but it is the way. It is. It's just how things are done. It's how the best coaches do it. And I really like that because he's just literally just doing those heavy weights as fast as possible in those scenarios. Very simple. He's not trying to recreate his sport. He's not trying to do band assisted fucking discus throws while leaning sideways on a fucking gymnastics ring or something, and like it's just he's really reinforcing what works, and he won the most recent Olympics, so this isn't something where it's like from the 80s or something. This is still works today. Evolution hasn't sped up over the course of a million years. It's still very same for everyone,
Also, so when you're talking about bridging the gap between strength and plyo work, with or without PEDs, like PEDs won't help you bridge the gap anymore. Like PEDs will just help you do the training you're doing. And they'll certainly help. They'll give you a stepwise increase. And over the course of a few years, they'll give you a massive increase. But it's not like this thing of like suddenly they'll fill in all the gaps in your training and they'll suddenly give you those improvements that are like fill those massive voids in your athleticism. They won't do that for you. They'll just allow you to do more of the training you currently do, generally. Critically underfunded says, evening lads.
Irish athlete.
What do you think of rucking or for conditioning in general? Could power or MMA athletes benefit from it? Don't do it. If you're like a power athlete, there's probably a month or 2 months of the year that rucking could be in any way beneficial for you, and it's when you're doing no other training. I don't know why rucking suddenly became so popular.
Shane Hunt does a lot of it, I think. And Tom Haviland, they both do. Who are both incredibly impressive specimens.
Yeah, don't do it. Like it's not.
It makes sense for them.
It makes sense for them. It doesn't make sense for anybody else. Just if you're looking to do better conditioning for MMA or better conditioning for a power athlete, get on an erg, get on a bike erg, a ski erg, a row erg, get on one of those machines where you can measure your outputs, measure how long you're going to be on it for, measure your actual power output, and then get good at that skill and use that skill, and then bring up all your aerobic values because of that. Bring up your general conditioning with those, and then you can go into some more specific conditioning if you're MMA with doing time controlled rounds, doing specific exercises for certain time brackets. That stuff works really well. Rucking isn't it, and it's not it for a load of reasons. First reason is it's usually not fast enough to actually be aerobically demanding. Second reason is there's usually too much load on you, so your joints aren't getting this kind of, you're not benefiting your aerobic values by not really hammering your joints. Like the hammering of your joints that will go on during a rucking session, you may as well just do like 1 minute on, 1 minute off wrestling rounds, and you'll get a great aerobic workout done. And your joints are going to be hammered probably a similar amount that they will be for rucking. And it's just not it for an athlete. Now, if you're somebody and you just want to train for general health, like we were talking about earlier with the keto stuff, you want to train for general health, get a small bit stronger, get a small bit more aerobically fit. You probably won't get faster, but if you're just generally want to get a bit better, you're doing like the Joe Rogan training model where you do some kettlebells and you do some training, then rucking is great. It's probably really enjoyable. You do it outside, get some fresh air in, feel like you're achieving something. But for the vast majority of people, for the vast majority of athletes who want to get better at their sport, rucking isn't an answer for anything.
For like Tom Haviland and Shane there, the reason they're doing it is because they're massive human beings.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for them. You have to imagine like how uncomfortable it would be for them to do running or hill sprints or any kind of stuff like that. So it's a way for them to do extra work capacity stuff, increase calories, increase demand on an activity that's quite low impact, for them. So that's probably why it's something they prefer, specifically like in Shane's case.
Mr. Greenix says, what is an optimal squat frequency for an intermediate? Is 3 or 4 times a week too much? 2 times a week, optimal. If you want the best squat outcomes, 2 times a week. If you're a weightlifter, maybe it's 2 times a week and a front squat. But if you want to get a bigger back squat, it's 2 times a week. Full stop.
Wait, what are you answering?
What is an optimal squat frequency for intermediate?
Sorry.
There's another squat frequency question lower down.
Sorry, I thought you were reading Alex Ward's question.
No.
So Alex Ward said, what would you... Yeah, twice a week for everyone. So there's like that recovery period. And by the time you've covered then, that next squat session is in. Anything more than that, unless you're elite level weightlifter, is pointless. Speaking of Shane Hunt, for example, he only squats twice a week and he's squatting enormous weights. No, there's generally no need to squat more than that. So for weightlifting, it's generally some periods you might have 2 back squats and 1 front squat. But in general, people ask squatting frequency. I assume they mean just back squatting frequency. So twice a week is loads for everyone. Alex Ward saying, what would you recommend when it comes to weightlifting mobility drills that can be done for 20 minutes daily? The apps out there seem to be heavily focused on static stretching. Thanks very much. So it depends what you need, Alex. It's really depends. Like you could have huge amounts of dorsiflexion and then zero ability to rack a barbell. So you would obviously be more best served by doing a lot of front rack stuff as opposed to stretch your ankles for 15 of those 20 minutes, or vice versa. If you've incredibly tight ankles, it's a lot more in your interest to focus on your ankles, calves, soleus, foot, all that good stuff, instead of doing that if you already have a front rack but terrible ankle mobility. So it just really depends on what you need, Mr. Alex Ward. Again, find what you need to do and then just figure out the things you need to do for those and then do them consistently. In general, people don't have a problem finding out what stretches they can do. Like it's a YouTube away just to say internal rotation for hip stretch and then going into the hip and look at ones that find work for you or feel uncomfortable and just doing those consistently. Most people's problem with mobility is that they just won't do it for long enough and don't do it consistently enough is the biggest issue.
Also, static stretching is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If if it was me and I knew I needed to work on mobility, I'd probably just put it in someone else's hand and I'd get something like Ramwad or one of those subscription services. I'd try something like that.
Wolfpack
those.
Fitness.
What's that?
Wolfpack Fitness.
Do you know Dara Fitz started Ramwad before Ramwad existed and it was called Wolfpack Mobility?
It's so funny.
I still have all the videos. They're still up there on the drive.
Imagine how rich you'd be.
Imagine how rich I'd be if I wasn't 19 and aimless. Yeah.
What
18 even, I think. But yeah, they were great videos. We'll have to release those and do a reaction to them someday.
I bet they're probably good.
It's all the same stretches I use right now.
Says a lot about the stretches you use now. What are Ian's favorite low back movement for strength? I wonder is he
US.
I wonder if he doubling wants to say US.
US
is my limiting factor in my deadlift. So for people who are deadlifting, the one I love the most is Paul's deadlifts at the knees, and it's a thing. It's so funny. A few years ago, so weightlifter's been doing that for decades, but I can't remember who it was. But it was some weightlifter, not weightlifter, some powerlifter put up a video about it, or they were like, "Here's like a revolutionary exercise. It's like deadlifts with a pause." It might have been someone on Elite FTS maybe in the latter years, but I thought it was quite funny. Anyway, deadlifts with pause at the knee or pause off the floor are phenomenal for that lower back stuff. So generally for sets of 3 to 5, I like to see a pause for 2 to 3 seconds. They're a phenomenal one. I like prone back extensions if they don't hurt your back. So sometimes people get a little bit of discomfort in the SI joint if they really over-exaggerate the extension of their lower back when they're doing prone back extensions. I like IYTWs, barbell rows. So don't forget about a lot of rear delt stuff as well. So rear delt flies, Lou raises are quite good. But pause deadlifts are some of the best things. If you can do good mornings without injuring yourself, they are also phenomenal. But good mornings, depending on the person, can be very productive or not productive. So if you have the ability to do them, I like when people can do them. But if not, it isn't a major issue. Then 45-degree back raises or glute ham developer back raises are phenomenal as well. So doing those with a hold at the top are some of the best ones.
We pick a few questions?
Yeah.
Okay, Ian Young has a question. He says, "Hey lads, can I do 5 days a week of BJJ while running the weightlifting program and the RTA program?
What?
If 3 days of BJJ are relatively low intensive, 45-minute classes with only a short live roll at the end. Also,
Ian, you know that's not right. Ian, you know that.
You must be on some ball of gear.
Even if you're on a ball of gear, Ian, come on.
I don't know.
Ian, you know that's not right.
I don't know anyone who could do that.
Ian, you know that's not right.
If you wanted to not get better at weightlifting, not get better at squatting, and maybe get a bit better at jiu-jitsu, that would be a good way of doing it. But that ain't it.
Ian, you know that's not right. Ian, you know that's not okay.
It's not it.
It's
too much.
Tony Smith says, considering switching from bodybuilding style training to powerlifting, but my numbers are fairly poor, reckon to seek a powerlifting program a good starting place, or get better first and then run it. No, if you've been doing bodybuilding style training, you can definitely do the Seek a powerlifting program, no problem whatsoever. If you want to regress further back, then you can do the basic strength program or the beginner strength program. Seek a Strength is on the website as well. So that's a much more linear fashion. So you could run that first and then run the powerlifting program after if you wanted to make the most gains, which might be a better plan actually. So if you run the beginner strength program, so there's a male or female version. Tony Smith, not to assume your gender, but I assume you're male, so the male version. And I would run that, and then you could run the powerlifting program.
I had a good one and I lost it. So dash says, "Are lever belts worth it? Do they corrode or rust?" Lever belts are definitely worth it if you're a powerlifter competing quite regularly.
I'd use a lever if I was powerlifting.
100%. It's the best tool for that particular job.
Oh man, you feel so
it's
in
like,
there.
You know,
100%.
It's the best solution to that currently exists.
If I wanted to cut my depth in squats, I'd use it all day.
Hey,
no,
it is like in terms of that thicker belt. Getting a thicker belt to ratchet down is difficult, particularly with like 2 prongs where you're trying to pull it across and put a prong in and then release it afterwards. It's a whole thing, you know. That Cerebus belt I have, I love it, but it's difficult to put on and take off. Lever belts are just tighter, they're better, they work better. In terms of do they corrode, everything will corrode. If you train in an environment where corrosion is going to happen, just a spray of WD-40 every week will stop anything in the world from rusting.
This is not. So I'm looking at, someone said, Ian T said, go look at Primus Cosmos. So I thought these were going to be the most vile hang power cleans ever. But oh my god, they're just hang high pulls. They're amazing. So they're like the Chinese. No, they look great. That's perfect for throwing. They're so clean. Look how clean these are. I'd go a little bit faster, but not if you.
Oh my god.
Yeah, was not expecting this.
Jesus.
14 years old. So what are you asking? Oh, have a look. Interesting thoughts. Yeah, so if you watch the Valerie Allman video, Cameron Rogers, throwers, we see them do those similar kind of stuff with heavy barbells. Obviously, a huge fan of that. The big thing for power sports and the throwers, heavy weights as fast as you can. That's like, it's literally as simple as that, and it's as difficult as that. Heavy weights.
Big, strong, and fast.
But the heaviest weights you can lift as fast as you possibly can. So the speed is the limiter, and then when your speed is consistent, adding more weight. So for Daniel Stahl, it just happens to be that he can move 270 kilos very, 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 very fast. And then other people can only move 150 kilos that fast. And that's fine. Very heavy weights, very fast is your primary concern as a power sport athlete, as a thrower. Easier said than done, but very, very important.
Nicholas Carras says, heard about a phenomenon where after a skill-based session, if you take a nap, you'll see reverse firing of the affected synapses, leading to higher quality development. Is this actually a real thing? So everything I've read so far basically concludes on the fact that we don't understand why it's happening. So I haven't seen the reverse firing of synapses or the affected synapses being kind of nailed down as a reason why. But undoubtedly, undeniably, everything we've studied and read so far has pointed us in the direction that high quality sleep directly following a skill session or directly following the learning of something will increase your retention of that and allow you to learn it faster the next time. So we're not quite sure why it's happening, or there's not a generally agreed on consensus as to why exactly it happens, but definitely it allows you to learn things faster, it allows you to learn things better, and you'll retain things an awful lot better having good quality sleep following a skill session. The one thing I will say on that is, like, it's not like you have to go for a nap at the gym quickly just after you finished your boxing session. It's mainly to do with the sleep the night afterwards, getting that deep sleep.
You also need to be well slept beforehand, or else you won't learn things very well. So sleep before and after is just as important.
Yeah.
I'm enamored by this Primos Cosmos fella.
Primo.
Oh.
Hey.
Not on the live stream theory. Is he any good, I wonder?
Uchi Hamad says best hypertrophy split, upper, lower. I'm guessing I wouldn't do a hypertrophy split. I would do training sessions throughout the week. If you're doing 4 hypertrophy sessions throughout the week, I do some sort of upper body and some sort of lower body in every training session. And then I just get all of my body parts done throughout the week, with my major strength lifts being done across all 4 sessions. Upper lower splits aren't the way to do it, particularly if you're quite strong or you're going for heavier lifts during those hypertrophy sessions. The last thing you want is it just to be an upper body session, you just to be warming up your upper body, and then your lower body isn't really engaged when you're bench pressing or strict pressing overhead or doing heavy bent over rows for a back session. You want to be splitting upper, lower, anterior, posterior across the entire 4 sessions. But the upper lower split is kind of a fad.
Siki jump win, not soon. Not this year anyway. Not this sign of this year.
Unless if there was like a lockdown which disabled 90% of the other things we have to do every day, we could get it done.
CK Weightlifting 2.0 will be out very, very, very soon.
Very soon.
Super soon.
Super soon. Okay. Do you want to pick one more? Colin Morell says, I know you lads aren't big fans of RPE, but do you think it's worthwhile for accessory exercises? On live stream the other day, you were talking about accessories for the RTA. So look, a whole point of accessory exercises are accessories to the main lift. So if you were to go ham, which is hard as a motherfucker, on accessory lifts, you're going to negatively influence the main lifts, and that's obviously not a good thing. So we might talk about reps in reserve for accessory exercises. We might talk about relative intensity on accessory exercises. So it is useful for that. But the main thing on accessory exercise is you don't go mental. And like once you're being sensible with accessory exercises, once they're progressing from week to week and getting heavier or more volume or heavier and more volume, then all that is good. But with accessory work, you always need to be hyper conscious that you're not trying to kill yourself with accessories. Accessories are there as an accessory to the main lifts.
Callum, I've like three there. I want to see. Callum Brud Brophy said, when you guys prescribe exercise for athletes that are a bit more particular, do you guys have a movement matrix of progressions and regressions, or you just think hard? I don't even think hard, to be honest. It just comes into your brain. It comes in from the ether. You're like, this is what this person needs. No, so most of it is logical thought, and then that logical thought has been applied several
hundred
times before that scenario. So when you see the scenario reemerge, whatever it is, you're just like, this is what we need to do here. Thankfully, most of the time, very correct, which is great. Because there's only so many scenarios, and there's only so many things wrong with people. So you don't even think that hard. You're just like, your brain just runs through that Rolodex. You're like, oh, that person can't get their knees out of the way in the snatch. So pause at the knee snatches really well. Or someone has really weak triceps in the bench. So like JM press is probably the best place to go to, or weighted push-ups. Mm-hmm. You know, you just kind of do what seems right. Because you've thought about it beforehand. It's not just guessing.
You've been thinking about it for the last 10 years, every single day. The other thing that pops up is like, I'll get an athlete from a different sport that I mightn't be coaching currently, or that I mightn't have coached in a year or two, or that I mightn't have ever coached. And a lot of the time I'll find myself thinking, as I'm planning their initial block of training, like, oh, is this a concern or isn't it a concern? Is this going to be an issue when they do their normal skill sessions, or isn't it going to be a concern? And to date, I haven't had a situation where within the first week it hasn't worked itself out.
Yeah.
Where you immediately know everything you need to know, you know.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always like that.
No, definitely not.
It takes a long time.
Sean Moore said, all right, lads, really enjoying the beginner strength program. If I'm planning out my year, what would you advise to do next? Redo beginner strength or move on to something like beginner weightlifting? So the beginner weightlifting would only be useful if you wanted to do weightlifting. You can definitely rerun the beginner strength. I'd imagine most beginners should be able to rerun it with just some updated numbers and make some good progress. After that, then I would be going to the powerlifting program, most likely. But then kind of assess where you are, see what you enjoy in the gym, see you enjoying that strength training stuff. And if you are, I think the powerlifting would be the next best place to go.
Okay, this is my last one. Christopher Olin says, hey lads, do you confirm the rule of specificity in quarter mile runners, strength training when going towards competition period, moving from low intensity, high rep, low power towards low rep, high power training? Yeah, that X graph dictates almost all training splits or all training programs. Definitely for people who follow like standard block periodization, linear progression, everything usually goes along those lines. Now, sometimes you'll have a little bit of a bump at the start where you'll start gaining volume and gaining overall workload when the weights are kind of similar, and then slowly you'll bring volume and workload down. But yeah, for most athletes.
In your videos, you usually praise high bar and narrow stance squatters. Would you and could you still coach a wide stance low bar squatter? I see this kind of comment quite a few times where people are like accusing us of falling into a demographic of what we think squatters fall into. So we're like, I see this a couple of times. People are like, you guys are obsessed with high bar squatting or whatever. You can see it on like it's powerlifting videos. It's not that we're obsessed with that side of squatting. If squatting super wide with minimal knee flexion was a better way to squat in competition, then we would just coach people that way. There's nothing. We coach a load of sumo deadlifters because they can deadlift more weight that way. If no personal opinions aside, if that's the most weight they can do in competition, that's the way we do it. So would you and could you? I'd probably manage to coach someone who could do
I've got some low bar squatters because it's the best thing for competition.
But the low bar squatters, in terms of that wide stance, I've yet to see anyone who is a better squat with that kind of west side, elite FDS, old school, equipped raw style of squatting with the low bar. Plus, loads of all of my competitive powerlifters squat low bar for competition, but the vast majority of them squat approximately hip width out. And funny enough, it always works out best for them. It always shows for the best quality squat. And you'll see a lot of the better lifters who aren't 180 kilos and powerlifting are moving in that direction. You'll see a lot of people like Dan Grisby, John Hack, Shane Hunt. Squat's a little bit wider, but he's a very high bar style squat. When it comes to his low bar squat competition, loads of those best lifters squat that way, and it's a better way. And it's just not the way anymore. Super wide.
It's just good mechanics.
Yeah.
Like you can't do a biomechanical analysis of that super wide squat without saying like, oh, that's massively inefficient. You can't, like the numbers do not work out on a super wide stance sitting back into the chair.
Yes.
It just doesn't work out.
And you'd never use that side of squat for athletes.
Jesus, no.
But if that was a better way of doing it, then that's what we would do. With just no attachment to it.
Ian 0098 says something weird that nobody's any interest in.
What's that?
Rambo commented at the very end.
Oh, no one cares about Rambo.
Nobody cares about Rambo. Rambo's gone. Like, Rambo's not here anymore. He's not in the vlogs. He's not around.
Yeah, maybe we'll see Rambo next year.
Maybe we will. Okay.
Right.
Thanks very much for tuning in.
That guy was the Olympic champion in 2008.
I saw that, yeah. Thanks very much, guys.
That's nice to see.
We'll see you soon. It's nice to see.
Because I was like, he's training in a really nice manner. I was like, people don't train like that much. And then, but because he's Olympic champion, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was like, all this training looks super diligent and super deliberate with everything he's doing. And I was like, I wonder if he's any good. But apparently he's good, yeah, if he's winning the Olympics 2008.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.